Shar Weigel, and I am with the League of Women Voters of the River Towns, and I want to welcome you all here tonight. The League of Women Voters, as you may know, is an organization dedicated to being sure that everyone who is eligible to vote can vote, and that everyone's vote is informed and educated. And we are a strictly nonpartisan organization, and what that means is that we will never support or oppose a political party or a candidate. And because of that role, we are often asked to moderate forums at all levels of elections, just like tonight. And because of that, we have some pretty specific moderation rules that we will be going over, and you'll see how we handle that piece of it. In a second, I'm going to introduce you to Suzanne Kavik, who will be your moderator tonight. But I want to let you know that I will be keeping time, and we'll be showing the candidates a 30-second paddle and this paddle. And they will be allowed to finish their thought when they see this paddle, but to be fair to each of them and to make good use of your time, we will expect them to finish up so that it can be equitably shared. You're going to see me looking at my phone. I'm not being rude. I'm using the timer on my phone, so that's how I'm going to do it tonight. Also, you all were given cards to fill out when you came in, or pieces of paper with questions. You may have questions arise during the evening, and Jody and Karen are back there and can get another sheet of paper to you, and they'll be sorting through questions and bringing them up here. So I do want to introduce you to Suzanne Kavik. Suzanne is president of the League of Women Voters of Newcastle, and that's very important because when we moderate a session, the moderator will never be from the district in which the election is occurring. So Suzanne is not from around here by design, and she is very passionate about healthcare, women's healthcare, reproductive rights, and women's health issues, and so that's sort of kind of her passion and background. So I'll turn this over to Suzanne, who will give you some more of the rules, but I do want to thank you for coming out to make democracy work tonight.
Thank you, Shar, and thank you to everybody coming out. As she said, I'm actually from Newcastle, so I am completely no skin in this game, right? So it's very important that we make best use of our time. I'm going to just go through the ground rules. One of the things is that I ask that everybody turn their phone off or to silent mode if you haven't done so already, all devices. And I would ask you to refrain from all applause until the very end after closing statements. It's really important to give our candidates as much time for their answers and to get as many of your questions in as we can. So as few of interruptions as possible will be perfect. So we have determined the order of the opening statement by drawing lots. We just did that a few minutes ago. The order of the closing statements will be in reverse. So whoever went last for opening statements will go first for closing statements. Also, the order of the first question will also be in reverse from the opening statement. After that, we will rotate the order of who answers the question first to be fair. Each candidate will have 1.5 minutes for their opening statement to answer the question and also for their closing statements. No comments of a personal or abusive nature will be permitted at any time during this forum. The timekeeper you already know is Shar Weigel, and she is facing them so they can see her her little expertise, her little things that she's holding up. Also, the questions that you ask will be given to me. I will be reading out the questions. Please keep them to under 1 minute. They must be about an issue, not a statement. And any questions that are of a personal nature will not be permitted. Tonight we have 4 candidates for 3 positions on the board of your Hastings School Board. In alphabetic order, your candidates are Allison Andrews, Nanisha Nunez, Sylvia Robles, and Doug Sondheim. They are not sitting in alphabetical order. They are clearly sitting in the order of the way of the lots. So those are your ground rules, and we're going to start now with Ms. Andrews with your opening statement.
Okay. Thank you to the League of Women Voters and the PTSA and to all of you for being here tonight. I'm Allison Andrus, and I'm running for the Board of Education because I feel deeply about our school system. I have 2 boys in the district, one who's at Hillside and one who's at FMS. And since they began their education, it has become one of the most important things in our family's life. As a result, I served on the one of my son's preschool boards, and now on the PTSA board, I'm the current co-president. I'm a lifelong educator. I got my master's degree at Bank Street College of Education. I taught for many years in the city, and I'm in my 20th year as a tutor. I know we're going to talk about a lot of different issues in education tonight, but there are 3 that stand out to me for Hastings. The first is the curriculum and having a consistent progression in services and curriculum across all 3 schools. The second is pairing that work with consistent teacher training. And the third is with a new superintendent starting, that we work collaboratively to really move a strong strategic plan forward. I'm a teacher, I'm an educator, and I'm a PTSA board member who has worked with administrators and parents for years now for the best for our children, and I want to do more.
Could you please hold your applause till the very end of the forum? Thank you. Mr. Sondheim.
My name is Doug Sondheim. I'm currently on the Board of Education, have been for 3 years. I've got 3 kids, 9, 7, and 5, 3 boys, and I've lived in Hastings for about 8 years now. I ran for the board 3 years ago for the same reason that I'm running now. In my professional life, I do organizational leadership consulting, working with organizations that are challenged with a variety of issues that they want to help fix, to change, to drive, to move forward. It's one of the reasons why I ran for the board, because I saw some challenges and issues, quite frankly, I'll be frank about it, in the central office. I think if you look at our central office in our district, it is one of the thinnest for a variety of reasons, don't have time to go into now, but in the area, and which means our central administrators are really stretched thin, and obviously that kind of stuff doesn't turn on a dime. You've got to be really thoughtful and strategic about how you ensure people are brought into that system, work together in that system, and so I really bring that lens. I should also say I have a master's degree from Teachers College in education, adult education, and so I focus on adult education and leadership, so most specifically transformational learning for adults. And so I'm specifically also very interested in professional development as a driver of improvement across our district.
Ms. Robles?
Good evening, everyone. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Silvia Robles, and my family and I have lived in Hastings for the past 10 years. My husband and I have 3 sons, and next year I will have a child at each school. I've decided to run for BOE because I've spent a significant amount of time as a parent and volunteer developing relationships with people throughout the school district. This provides me with an informed view of where we stand today. People often describe me as someone who wears many hats because I've been actively involved in groups like the PTSA and RISE, amongst others. I find the most valuable aspect of this work is the insight I've gained from the varied perspective of parents, teachers, and administrators. As an attorney who practiced in the nonprofit sector, I also bring experience balancing multiple viewpoints to find pragmatic solutions. Besides giving my time to the district, I want you to know the type of trustee I would be if you vote for me. I will govern to gain your trust and without an agenda. I will make impartial decisions with the best interest of the district in mind, always remembering that students are at the heart of the work we do. I will listen to varied perspectives and ask fair questions. And finally, I will show up and work hard, consistently, and with integrity. If you don't know me, I would encourage you to speak to people who do, and I believe they will confirm that the pledges I make to you tonight are ones that I have a proven track record of living up to. In conclusion, I want you to know I did not make the decision to run for BOE lightly, and that I spent the last few years attending meetings regularly to gain an understanding of the duties it performs. Now that I've committed to serving, I will give my all to the position. Thank you for your consideration.
Hi, I'd like to start by thanking you all as well for being here tonight, and thank you to the League of Women Voters and the PTSA for generously hosting this event. It's with great pleasure that I really get to introduce myself to you. Again, my name is Nanisha Nunez. I'm a proud graduate of Hastings High School. I'm a teacher, and I'm an incumbent Board of Education trustee as well. So much of my identity is just wrapped up in Hastings, but particularly the schools. And it was because the schools challenged me to be the best version of myself every day. And it was because of the rigorous yet accessible curriculum that I had that was centered on collaboration and inquiry that it made me a successful college student. And I went on to get degrees in education. And that's why I have the tremendous privilege of being a fourth grade teacher at Concord Road in Ardsley. And the reason I share all of that with you is because all of my experience teaching I've done co-teaching, curriculum writing, collaboration. I've brought that into serving 10 months on the board. And as a young woman of color, I bring a lens that none of my board members really have, and nor do any of my candidates. And that's why I've been such a strong advocate for supporting special education, ICT classes, K-5, adding aides, hiring a superintendent that would really support our values as a community. And if elected, it would be my honor to continue doing those things, because I would love to continue supporting the superintendent of schools that we hired, Dr. Henning Piedmont, because ultimately that would mean our children are going to be happy, lifelong learners that are eager to be part of a global community. Thank you.
Nope, no applause, please. We're going to hold it till the end. So we're going to start with a question from the PTA, and we're going to start in the opposite order, so Ms. Nunez will start. In our district, special education and general education have traditionally operated in separate silos, resulting in two parallel paths regarding access to curriculum, instruction, and opportunity. What do you feel is the role of the BOE in this challenge? How can it support our new superintendent and assistant superintendent in breaking down these barriers? And what is a criteria you would use to evaluate progress and success?
Well, first, I think as a board member, our job is to create policy, because we need to organize the system so that special education and general education aren't silos, because special education, anything about special education is about general education. Children learn in different modalities, they need differentiation, whether they are considered to have learning disabilities or not. So we need to, one, recognize that we need to meet children where they're at, no matter what that child, who that child is. So I think, first of all, as a board member, your job is to create policy that supports that. So that means we have to find the funding to support professional development and train our teachers. What does ICT mean, integrated co-teaching? What does co-teaching look like? What does co-teaching look like for Hastings? Because there's different models of what co-teaching is. And as a board member who actually is, who has master's in special education, I have a deep knowledge of best practice of what special education is. I have a classroom that is inclusive. I teach children of all different needs, and the beauty of inclusion is that it really prepares children to face the world that they're going into, and that's the whole purpose of our education, to get all children ready to be global citizens. So that would be my role as a board member to do.
Ms. Robles?
For me, I think that the role of special education and general education is one. I mean, what I think is that right now we're really at a crossroads for our district, because we finally committed to hiring on an assistant superintendent who is in charge of curriculum. And as I understand it, as a BOE, the role that I think that we play is to support the people who we are hiring and who have been vetted to bring professional expertise into our district. I think we need to give somebody who's a new superintendent and a new assistant superintendent who's landing into a particularly newly developed role to actually get the landscape of the programs and services as they currently exist. If you were to review the audit that Dr. Katzman gave us in her most recent progress report in December, I think she pointed out to the fact that there's a lot of inconsistency across the schools, and it oftentimes as though a lot of work is replicated. If we're trying to make the system as efficient as it can be, both for the special ed students as well as the general ed students, moving towards it being a unified system, we need to give those people the time and the room to actually implement the ideas that they have, rather than doing anything that would jeopardize that. So that's what I think we should do.
Mr. Sondheim.
I've obviously become very familiar with the special ed audit. have read through that many times. I've read through as well the progress made, and I think there's some really clear things that we need to do in order to continue to make progress. One is, I've already spoke about my opening statement, continue to work at the central office level. The hiring of an assistant superintendent of curriculum will hopefully provide us some of the leverage needed to create the mind space to start having more of these conversations about how do we do some of this stuff. I think creating as well a high-quality instruction inside of what's called a multi-tiered system of support that ensures that children are getting supported in the least restrictive environments. And I think the idea of creating inclusive environments wherein children can be socially with their friends as much as possible and also get the instruction they need is critical. I think what I've heard over and over again, some sets of stories I've heard most while I've been on the board is children who are pulled out too much, too often, who lose out on that social interaction, and as a result have a different experience of school, which has all sorts of negative knock-on effects. It's obviously tough to do, but it's something we have to continue to strive to do. How do we get that instruction inside of least restrictive environments? And that's something I'm really committed to working with the assistant super and super to do, to put some of those systems in place.
Ms. Andrews?
This question makes me think again about Dr. Katzman's last presentation about the audit. And she was saying that what she really recommended was that our central office start to face in the same direction. And that really stood out to me in terms of the next steps. So the fact that the superintendent is now hired and has very much this viewpoint of least restrictive environments. And an assistant super is on the way to being hired, and with that same sort of philosophy in mind. And then from that top spot, they're going to work with the administrators and then the teachers, again, including teacher training, so that teachers can be prepared for many different levels. I think where we get caught sometimes, and there's frustration on the parents' end, the student end, the teacher end, is that the training needs to match what we're asking so that they can really provide the best teaching that they can. So I'm very positive about the future, considering what's in place now, but we do need to work together to talk about how are we going to gauge results and how are we going to then adapt if we find, okay, we've made some steps, but we could make more. So together, the superintendent and board do that, and that'll be an important next step.
Our next question is, if you are elected to the BOE, how would you approach a relationship with our new superintendent, and how would you communicate her plans, policies, and responsibilities to those working in the district and to the community at large? And we're going to start with Ms. Robles.
So I would say that for the superintendent who's coming in, something that they need to know about our town is that we have a lot of parental engagement. We're very passionate. We have strong opinions. And it would be wise for her to be somebody who seeks out collaboration and obviously buy-in from her leadership team. You know, she's fortunate that she's coming into a district where we have professionals with the expertise and command of their subject matter, that they really bring their all to their office every day. And the beneficiaries of that are our students. Now, I would say that in order for the superintendent to be able to communicate her understanding of what it is that she wants to accomplish, she really is going to have to take some time to acclimate, to get to know the district, so that she can also explain to people what it is that she's learning. None of this is going to be done in an environment where we don't have to have the input of other people. And I think that in order to gauge trust from other people, the best way to really incorporate and implement the changes that need to be made, you need to forge trust. So that's the place that I would begin with her.
Mr. Sondheim.
Well, I've had the opportunity to start to develop a relationship with Dr. Henning Piedmont. And one of the things I've shared, so one of the things I've noticed looking at our board and other boards is that superintendents come on and they're given a mandate, and usually they come on and people want them to do a lot of stuff quickly, and I've watched how that can blow up. And one of the things I've spoken with Dr. Henning Piedmont about is we need to go slow in order to go fast. We need to stop, pause, listen on our way into the district and really understand what's going on. And I've shared with her the idea that I think what we're going to really want from her as a district is not to come in and start changing things too quickly, because I've seen that blow up really, really easily, quite frankly. As far as engaging with the community, you know, I think that there have been a lot of, let's be honest, there's been 4 supers in the last 4 years once she comes on. That's a lot of different people engaging with the community. And one of the problems with that is there's a loss of continuity. And we need to figure out a way to, what do we know already? How can we take that, share that with her, bring her up to speed? And then what smart engagement process can we use for there so she can get out in the community, continue to fill in the gaps? But I'm sensitive to the fact some people have come up to me and said, we're surveyed quite a bit. We've had a lot of meetings. We've had a lot of discussions. And I'm not quite sure where it all goes. I think we have to be sensitive to that. There's almost survey fatigue, right? So that's something I think we want to do.
Ms. Andrews.
I've met Dr. Henning Piedmont a few different times, and I think you're going to find her extremely approachable and a good listener, and somebody who will listen to, if Doug is on the board, that advice to take a minute, slow down, listen to people, build that connection of trust before making giant changes. But I think she also comes with a lot of experience and a lot of good ideas. So that relationship is a two-way street, and I hope people will be open to hearing what her suggestions are as we get the ball rolling. In terms of communicating with the community at large, and that takes several forms already, coming to BOE meetings, reading the minutes, watching the film, and I think emailing people or having conversations, community get-togethers, where we really talk about what's on your mind. And that's the way we're going to keep this going in a direction where people feel heard, all stakeholders are involved. And we need to do that as much as possible, so she's not overwhelmed, but that we all have a voice.
Ms. Nunez.
Well, being a part of Dr. Henning Piedmont's hiring, I will say that, first of all, we are so fortunate, and she is so brilliant. And being a part of that hiring process really gave me the opportunity to get to know her a bit. And since the hiring, we've even gotten to know each other a little bit, and I've shared my history of Hastings, and we did so over cake. And she had shared with us her wonderful entry plan of what she plans to do to get to know the community. So I completely defer to her judgment in terms of how she's going to get to know who we are and the fabric of our community. And I have no doubt in her ability to do that. But in terms of my relationship with her, I have an open door policy. She emailed me, we had some exchanges, we met up, and that's the way I like to operate. Education is about relationships. It's about our relationships with teachers and students. It's our relationships with our teachers and admin, and with the Board of Ed members and the superintendent. So fostering that relationship is really integral to all of our children's success. As I said, she has a really robust entry plan that I'm really excited to watch roll out. So in terms of relating her plans, like I said, I think she's going to do a really good job with relaying those things at board meetings and keeping communication transparent between us, so that we can let you know as a community. And I'm really looking forward to the opportunity to continue supporting her and getting to know Hastings and really supporting what our needs are.
Thank you. Mr. Sondheim will start this round of questions. The recent issue of the HHS school newspaper devoted its entire issue to understanding the racial climate at HHS. An article reported that in an anonymous survey, 38 out of 90 HHS students agree with the statement, quote, "I think racism is a problem at HHS," end quote. What is your reaction to this report, and how would you suggest the Hastings schools and community could address this?
So I imagine that stat is something that is probably pretty comparable around the country right now, quite frankly. And I think that the just the idea of racism and sensitivity to racism, sensitivity to a variety of multicultural issues is critical. I think that when we talk about inclusive environments, it cuts across everything. It cuts across race, it cuts across socioeconomic, it cuts across learning differences, and I think as a community, that's who we are as a community. And so we really need to be at the forefront, and quite frankly, we have started that process. We've got a diversity committee. We've allotted money to Janice Mateo Toledo as a diversity coordinator last year. We've increased that this year. Some of the big initiatives that she's been working on along with the diversity committee have been the continuing work on the incidence of bias protocol. So we looked into incidence of bias protocols. We realized for public education, they didn't really exist. And so we've been drafting one on our own. Diverse hiring practices. The last couple of years we've been part of a diversity hiring fair. And there was one other big thing. Oh, and the PD. We brought in Diane Goodman to do training on implicit bias, which was very well received. And I think that it starts with conversations, and it starts with professional development, and really being able to transform the mindsets, which we all know doesn't happen overnight. And that's the hard work we have to do as students, teachers, and the community as well.
Ms. Andrews.
Well, first, I think that Roz Abrams' approach to this discussion is the right step. I'm just so impressed that he devoted an entire buzzer issue to the issue of racism and got the students' feedback, and they were out there reporting and finding out about feelings and the rest of it. That is a huge step in the right direction to just create that. So more power to him. I'd like to hear more. You know, what's the next issue going to be? So go out and find out what are those 38% talking about, and that leads to another discussion and more research and more ways to break down those walls. So that's a great start. We are working in many ways, let's say at Hillside to start, she has a diverse groups initiative, and there's been professional development around that, brought in by the PTSA and by Amy Kazis, to start this whole conversation younger, having kids understand how to talk about these differences and work with it there. Facing History in Ourselves is a program I love that I brought in for the middle school and is now taking hold because of Janice Mateo Toledo. Programs like that are impactful, they're engaging, and they're a way for kids to learn about these issues and muddle through them.
Ms. Nunez.
Well, this issue has been one that's very near and dear to my heart, not just being a young woman of color and having 3 younger boys, brown boys, but as an educator and seeing that our district is really taking a stance at not just being not racist, but being anti-racist, first of all, just is incredible, because we recognize that there's work that needs to be done. And it's tough work, but we have really, as a board, committed. It's one of our board goals, we've committed to doing this work. And first and foremost, as Doug mentioned, we have a director of diversity and inclusion, and I've been able to work with her and help her plan some PDs that we're looking forward to in the future as well. And not only did I do that, but I found some DASA protocols, which the state had just updated, which said that our teachers needed training on implicit bias. And so we were able to bring that in and do that. So really staying abreast with what is best practice for our children, because if our educators aren't getting this professional development, how can they be anti-racist in our classrooms? So it's something that I'm very passionate about. I've studied at both the graduate and the postgraduate level, and it's really incredible that I get to be a part of the board who supports this goal.
Ms. Robles.
I just want to react initially by saying that I find that statement or that statistic very disturbing individually as a woman of color, as somebody who's raising 3 children of color in this district. That is something that is very personal to me. And honestly, that's one of the motivating factors that has led me to be as involved as I am in the district in a variety of different groups, whether it's the Diversity, Social, and Emotional Learning Committee, whether it's working on the Racial Bias Protocol, whether it's working with a group of students who actually have a lot of input and who are high school students who are quoted in a number of those articles. I can tell you that the level of dedication and funding that the district has allocated has really made a significant progress, where I think from a very bad place that I think we were in even as recently as 2 years ago, where we had, you know, swastikas appearing on our throughout the school on a weekly basis, where we had propaganda type little note cards appearing all over the place. This isn't something that I think about just on a philosophical level. It's something that I think about in terms of how it actually hurts people, how it harms people, and how it really, not just for the students who are students of color, but for all of us, how we relate to one another. This is who we are. This is not reflective of who our community should be. And I will tell you that I will bring all the energy that I have as an individual and as a person to help work on this committee in the most substantive of ways. That's a commitment.
Our next question is, what is your position on the district's adoption of the findings and recommendations of the educational audit originally presented to the BOE in August 2017? Will you support all of the recommendations adopted at that time? And we'll again start with Ms. Andrus.
Okay. I think Dr. Katzman's audit was incredibly comprehensive and impressive. If you went to her 2 presentations, that woman got deep into the schools and how things work and saw what needs work, where we're doing okay, and looked again a year later and assessed how much progress has been made. So there is a lot in there to plow through. And I definitely think there's a lot we need to pay attention to and commit to following. Again, starting with getting all of the administrators, that central office facing the same direction, making sure she was so, you know, she recognized the hard work in doing the multi-tiered services in each of the schools, but she said you all did your own work alone in your silo. It didn't go K through 12. You need to bridge the gaps here and work as one. And that's true with the curriculum, it's true with the training. Each year builds upon the next, so you're not starting fresh every year, and you're not starting fresh when you jump to a different school. They understand each other. And that was one of the biggest takeaways that I had. There are many intricacies, but I do think that needs a ton of work still. So I think we do need to focus on it.
Ms. Nunez.
Dr. Katzman gave us a roadmap, and it would be absolutely foolish not to follow that roadmap. She was the professional that we brought in to assess how we were doing. And it was clear that we had a lot of things that we weren't doing right. We do right by children every day, but it was clear that there are areas that we are not doing right by children. And so I think it would be really foolish for any board member to come up here and say that we are not going to follow that roadmap that she left us behind. This year on the board, we've committed to upping the position from Director of Curriculum Instruction to Assistant Superintendent of Curriculum Instruction, and hoping that that would help put into play the system and the organization that we need in our district to make sure that children are getting what they need. And I've participated as part of an active member of the policy committee where we're reorganizing our chart to say, what really are our roles? Where is everyone? And that is, you know, a fundamental thing that we need to have so that we have clear roles that are clearly established and a clear hierarchy of who's reporting to where, what teachers are being, who's the lead evaluator of special education teachers. Without a functioning system, our kids are going to be the ones who are suffering. So it's absolutely our job to adopt those changes as recommended by Dr. Katzman because it's written for us.
Ms. Robles.
I would say that citing the audit, to me, the most important thing, and I think something that all of us have articulated, is that what we want to see is for a district that has 3 schools, cohesion amongst those 3 schools. And the only way that you're going to be able to do that is if you have a clear understanding of what the leadership is. Right now, we have a central office that, as has been referred to, is quite thin. And so when people come in, you need to be able to have an understanding of who has authority and how that is going to be deployed within the respective schools. Having somebody who's an executive and who will have a second in command to actually help them determine what the different aspects are of curriculum that need to work, I agree with Dr. Katzman. I mean, I think that it's been clear for some time that we have needed somebody at the level of an assistant superintendent who has authority to help both develop and identify the gaps in our curriculum. Because right now, even if you do a wonderful job at Hillside, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be prepared to do the work that you need to do as a great writer in the middle school. To me, it would be a fallacy not to use the information that she's provided, which was informed by the professionals that we have in the school, as well as the administrators, as well as the parents. We need to take the information, we have to defer to people's professional expertise, and we need to get the work done rather than talking about it.
Mr. Song.
So as far as supporting the recommendations, yeah, I fully support them. We brought them all up, we voted on them, and we've supported them ever since. I think if we look at which ones are the most important right now, they're all important, but which ones need our attention the most? One is the central office. We've been working on that. We hope to make some real progress. We've made some. We hope to make more progress. The other is the high quality instruction inside of a multi-tiered system of support, and that is not something that turns on a dime. The setting up the program, setting up the curriculum, setting up the PD is something that takes years, and it takes a game plan. And I think one of the things Dr. Katzman said when she came in was, it wasn't quite this quick, but it was like, wait, you thought you were supposed to do this in a year? There was never, I think, a really clear articulation of, here's the set of things we want to do. It's not going to turn over quickly. It's going to take many years to do it. Here's the game plan. We didn't do a good job communicating the game plan. And that's something that we have to do. That's something I've communicated with current administration, and I've communicated with incoming administration. We've got to be much better at the project management side of this stuff. It sounds basic and nuts and boltsy, but in reality, that's what manages the expectation and has someone say, okay, great, that's coming in 2 years. I get it. I see how you're going to roll that out. I understand it. We have to be really, because that's the communication that the community needs and quite frankly deserves in understanding how this stuff's going to actually roll out.
Okay. What are the top 2 challenges in the district, and how will you address them? Ms. Nunez.
Well, I think first, just to piggyback on a lot that's being said, we have a lot of work to do in terms of aligning our curriculum, and that when I say that, I mean that for all children. And I think that is a very big challenge because of our lack of central office administration and the turnaround that we've had in superintendents. But I'm hopeful, and I don't come here in despair. I am very hopeful because we have been working, I've been on the board for 10 months, and we've been working tirelessly to find the right people to come in and do those things, and I really think that we did that. And I'm really proud of the work that we've done as a board to commit to hiring a superintendent and assistant superintendent of curriculum and instruction. So I think that is the first major challenge, would be now that we have those people in place, how are we going to ensure that our curriculum is horizontally and vertically aligned so that children are moving through the systems and gaining all the skills that they need to be productive citizens. I think the second challenge that we've also touched on a bit are issues surrounding diversity. And I think that because that coincides with health and safety, mental health and safety of children, that it needs to be our immediate focus, because children cannot learn if they do not feel safe and if they do not feel valued in the schools that they are going to. And with our mental health crisis in our nation, that's something that we can't ignore. So I think those would be our 2 top challenges.
Ms. Robles.
I would say, to begin with, the number 1 thing I think we need to do is that we need to forge trust in this district. We wouldn't have the level of turnover that we've experienced if we had faith in one another to really listen to the expertise that the people we hire to bring in, if we allowed them to actually roll out things that mean change. Change is hard for all of us. But if we go through the process of actually interviewing people, finding out what their credentials are, we need to listen to them. And that is a frightening thing. It doesn't feel empowering to any of us, whether we're teachers, whether we're parents, whatever role we feel, we are suspect of one another's motives. And that's something that really bothers me. I think it's a place, this is a wonderful community, but sometimes you just have to be able to listen to people and give them time. We are impatient. We want it done tomorrow. things of this magnitude, just cultural changes, they take time. That would be the first thing. The second thing is curricular. I mean, I think it's fairly obvious. We just don't have that continuity from one school to another. And again, that goes to the people who are going to be on the leadership team. Let them assemble the ideas that they need to deploy and give them the time to do it. That's it.
I think, number one is delivering the quality of education that we've become accustomed to while keeping taxes down. I mean, the simple truth of the matter is, with a reassessment, with the inability to deduct state and local taxes, and just kind of, what was the other thing that was hitting people so hard? Someone shouted out.
The salt, the bond.
The bond. How did I forget the bond? And the bond, look, the reality is there's a balancing act that's going on here, and this is not going to be an easy balancing act, right? This is not going to be something simple. This is going to require a lot of dialogue. Someone sent me a note earlier last summer and said, I know you didn't really plan on taking on the IRS, but really this is one of your jobs now as a board member, because we have to figure out how we can take out charitable contributions instead. And my answer to that is, I think we all have to do a better job. We used to have a citizen budget advisory group. I think we need to bring that kind of stuff back, because it's bigger than just a board. This is a systemic issue and challenge. How do we deliver this quality of education that we become accustomed to in a county like Westchester with ever-increasing taxes? That is number one. If we can't get that right, everything else just falls apart. Number two is obviously curriculum. That's the world we're in. That's why we're here. 85% of our budget is salaries. We need to make sure that we are delivering curricularly the experience that we all are here for, why we live here.
So for me, yes, one of the challenges, curriculum. I'm going to lump in with that the inclusion and diversity work, the services that we've been talking about, the building of skills, mental health. That's all part of an outstanding curriculum. So that's going to need a lot of support and a lot of input from parents, I think, and from students and from teachers and the central office as to how to reformulate and rejigger, how to train, so that we really make some leaps and bounds here, because people want to see that happen. It's not quick, but it has to be in place, and there are a lot of improvements to make there. The second part, I'm going to say the evaluation of what we're doing. We have so many good ideas, and people aren't afraid to share them, but how do we make sure we're getting where we want to go? So that's something that I know the BOE works on with the superintendent as a way to evaluate how she's doing, right? Are you meeting these goals? What's the timeline? And how do we want to adjust? And I think that's so important for us to feel the trust that Sylvia was talking about. Where are you? I don't want to keep breaking down the door. Are you still thinking about this? Are you moving towards it? We are, and this is where we are.
What skills do you bring to ensure effective communication among board members and between the board and community? And we'll start with Ms. Robles.
So I would say the chief skill that I bring is probably from my days as a practicing attorney, and that's that I really am somebody who weighs people's different perspectives, because nothing is absolute. I wish that I could propose to people that I have a silver bullet and a panacea to the multitude of challenges that we have to deal with in the school district. But the reality is that for every commitment you make, there's an impact on and a ripple effect that impacts a myriad of other groups. So for me, I always take time to listen and to think. I think people who know me will say that I'm deliberate. I don't react passionately to something. Whatever my convictions are, I'm somebody who can compartmentalize those and think about it in an impassive way. It's important to me. I think that if you only go with your own thought, you absolutely silence people who have opinions that are just as valid as your own, and it blinds you to making good decisions. Ultimately, what we're supposed to be doing is we're supposed to be governing in the best interest of everyone. And I think that That's what I want to do. I want to be somebody who's fair-minded and practical.
Yeah, I think it's obviously critical. So when I ran for the board the first time, I surveyed, I think, Lisa and I, when we ran together, 500 and some people in the community. We put a 55-page report together. If you read through that report today, it's still really valid. It's got a lot of great stuff in it. So I think surveying is really important. Obviously, it doesn't have the face-to-face, getting out and having forums and opportunities to meet. And when we did the bond, we had, I think, about 4 forums. Few I wish were a little bit more heavily attended than they were, but we had 4 forums, and just creating those opportunities for people are really important. And then, bringing that data back to the board and having good conversations about it, whether that's public conversations that we have with regards to a variety of public topics, whether that's things that come up that we have to have executive sessions about, continue to work on that board, those board relationships and how the board works together. Sylvia mentioned trust before. That's critical with the board as well. When trust exists, you can accelerate stuff. You can move stuff quickly. When trust doesn't exist, things slow down. And there's a lot of challenges, so we've got to continue to work on that. So I think in communication across the community, across the board, and then staying in really close communication with the superintendent, the assistant superintendents as well, and making sure those lines of communication and what they're communicating with the building leaders, other central office administrators, is constantly open lines of communication.
I actually talked to some friends about this kind of a question beforehand, and their reply tended to be, you listen. You listen very actively. And so I would say that is the first thing I bring. I want to hear from the different stakeholders before I start to deliberate. And these are important questions. What are we doing? Why are we doing it? And is this in the best interest of all our kids? So and let me include students and teachers in that as well. I really want to hear from them. I work collaboratively, so I would want to hear from the board members. I'm a researcher. If I don't understand, I'm going to go back and look it up. I would hope that when if new programs are proposed or whatever, we also need to do our due diligence and research. And then thoughtfully come together to come up with an answer or decision. So.
I think my biggest strength is I am very intrinsically aware of who I am and what I stand for and what principles guide every single decision, whether that's in front of my 4th graders or on the board. And that means that I listen to understand, but I can respectfully disagree. And I think that my strength comes in the fact that I'm diverse in thought. I think I represent just a voice that we haven't heard that often. I'm the class of '07, proudly, and I am a young woman of color who is excited about what the next chapters in my life are going to be, and I have no doubt that that's going to be living in Hastings and possibly raising my children here one day. So I think what I bring to the board is someone who's transparent and honest about what I'm feeling and thinking, but I can respectfully disagree and then commit, because we're all here with the same goal. And just because I don't agree with you doesn't mean that we can't come to a consensus to commit to move the work forward. And I think the last thing is that I ask tough questions because I'm really detail-oriented and I want to understand, but you need to come to me with honesty and all the information, because I will ask those tough questions.
Does the fact that the board considered cutting music and Spanish teachers and kindergarten aides this year have anything to do with the fact that we've been hiring dozens of psychologists and social workers and counselors and special ed teachers in the last several years? Can we afford to continue on this path without adversely affecting the quality of instruction? Mr. Sondheim?
I think your question at the heart of it is prioritization, and I think that prioritization requires dialogue. I don't really want to pit psychologists against music professionals. I think that's a trap that was set somehow. But I think we have a lot of work to do on prioritization. I think no matter how much work we do on it, there's like a limited bucket of money, and there's always going to be more hands that want to put their hand in that bucket than you have. And we've got to be really thoughtful about what is needed. it was a moving meeting, the meeting where the music community showed up, and it said a lot about who this community is. And you better believe we found the money for that, because that's just a really core value. But when people have psychological challenges, 200 people don't show up at a meeting and advocate for it. So we can't just gauge vocal advocacy in public to determine what our needs are. We've got to have other ways of indicating what those are. And quite frankly, it's the hardest job we have as board members, is figuring out how to allocate funds when everything's a good idea and you can't do everything. And that prioritization process, it goes back to the last question, dialogue, 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 and you can make some of those hard decisions together.
It's an interesting question, because we were just discussing, do we stand behind the audit? And the audit does require some of these hires. And in order to make that program function for all, or this program function for all learners, we have been behind the 8 ball for a while. So we need to put this in place in order to catch up and be in a spot where all kids' needs are being met. So that's a tough one, because that was essential. It had to happen. It really wasn't a, oh, let me just think about adding these. We needed it. I think there has been a lot of thoughtful discussion about, and even the hiring of a master scheduler who's coming in August. How can we sometimes jigger more flexible positions that people have in order to stay within the bucket of money that we have right now? Can we be more creative in order to allow us to have everything that people want, but have it in a meaningful way? And that's not always possible, and that's a difficult one, and it does involve stakeholder input. But as you said too, the group of people who come with with special needs and have the audit behind them, they may not get 200 people at that meeting, but they're no less in need. So it's something we all need to talk more about.
New York State doesn't always get education right. They threw in Common Core and sort of sent teachers for a ride, but they've gotten one thing right, and that's their mandates about social emotional learning. So the issue I have with this question is, this, yes, is a mandate, and we're meeting needs of all children. So this is not a special ed issue. This is, we need social workers and psychologists in place, because the things that children are facing, the stress, social media, bullying, those are real. And those are affecting their lives and their ability to have access to education. So those are non-negotiables. As a former Spanish teacher here at Hillside, music and Spanish are also non-negotiables. And when we think about the quality of education that we've been giving children here at Hastings, they deserve these things, because this is not just an elective. This is something that's going to make them well-rounded global citizens. This is something that's going to give them more opportunities. So what's our task is, like some of us have said, figuring out where the push and pull is. Is it about scheduling? Is it about finding creative ways to get money? HEF has just funded Challenge Success again, and is committed to doing that, and that has been an amazing program to help our high schoolers with stress. So we have a wonderful community who wants to support the learning that's happening in our schools, so we have to be super creative from our end, but also engage in the community.
My feeling about this is that, with regards to the additional hiring that we've done, particularly in the realm of special ed, it's really important to understand that those were obligations we just hadn't been meeting. These weren't things where we had a wiggle room to just kind of let things slide along in the way that they had been going for a number of years. These are professionals that these students and students across the board were entitled to, and who were suffering and not progressing as a lack of having the services provided to them. That doesn't mean that I negate the importance of music or any other type of special class. I'm a Spanish speaker. Of course, I think that that's very important. My children avail themselves of those variety of classes. However, I think that when you make determinations at the BOE level, especially because people become very passionate and they bring their energy to meetings, it's important for people to understand how that decision making is made also by the people who are the building leaders. We need to be informed in a way that it's not just how we feel, it's a matter of what is actually indicated by the professionals who are in the building. For me, it's important to have informed decision making. It's easy for me to have a passionate feeling about something when I don't really understand how it plays out in the school landscape. So yes, I'm willing to make tough decisions. They'll be unpopular decisions, but I'm going to make it in a way that's informed by the people who are actually there living the life in the classroom.
Have you worked with large budgets before, and if not, how will you prepare to do so? What role do you see for yourself in administering the district's $51.2 million budget and $18 million capital bond projects? Ms. Andrews.
I have not managed a large budget before. I'm afraid it's just my budget. But I have been spending a lot of time learning about this. And not everybody on the board comes in with that master financial background, but that doesn't mean it's rocket science and you can't learn it. So I've spent a lot of time already looking at the numbers, looking up terms that I wasn't familiar with, and I think that's a process you have to get up to speed on very quickly. Ask questions, have meetings so that you can understand where all the money is going. As Doug said before, I understand that a large part of the budget is really our teachers and the health care and the pensions, and then there's the rest. And you do need to look through that line by line in order to see, is there a way this could be done more economically? And try to find who is the right person to talk to in order to find those answers. Yes, that could be cut or done differently. So I would definitely commit to informing myself and staying abreast of all those figures, because you're in charge of it. So that's necessary.
I don't pretend to be a financial expert. However, I will say that we are afforded a training online, which is not the most engaging thing, but it is absolutely necessary. And being a part of the budget process this year, it was definitely a learning curve. But again, it comes back to our driving principles. What do we value as a community? What experiences do we want our children to have? And that is, if that stays as the center of our conversation, we're able to learn more about the issues. I was at the board meeting for the first time when it was presented to me while I had a concussion that music was getting chopped. And if you watch the videos, I had a very physical reaction to that. But we had a really great conversation as to why that was the case, and then we were able to work through it. So I think just getting the information from the building leaders and from our treasurer and now our superintendent, and understanding what was the thought process regarding some of the changes, and then saying, wait a minute, do these decisions reflect what we value as a community? We say that we value the arts. We say that, but we're chopping music. We say that we value this, but why are we putting Spanish on the chopping block for next year? So really always centering that question with our children in mind has helped, I think, drive some of the important conversations, like even with our TA cuts. We found the money to make less cuts. So there's always room to have these thoughtful conversations in a productive way.
Unfortunately, I do not bring a budget background to my as a part of my candidacy, but I will say that I'm not somebody who feels that I should be intimidated by my lack of familiarity with financial documents. I think that we're well served by the fact that we have a treasurer in Maureen Caraballo, who's somebody who really has guided this district through multiple budget processes. And I would look to her, honestly, in the beginning to really help familiarize me in alliance with the rest of who my colleagues would be on the Board of Ed to give me an orientation of how it is, what the numbers really mean, because I think a lot of times it seems quite inscrutable. From my perspective, the budget determinations that are made based on the recommendations of the people who are, again, the building leadership team. So I would say that while it's something that's not a familiarity to me, it's not something that I don't think that I couldn't catch up on, given the time, the dedication. Again, I'm a person who comes with an analytical background, so I understand it's part of the job, and that's something I have to do.
When I first got on the board, I remember one of the board members said, it's going to take you about 5 years to figure out what's going on in the budget. And it's actually not, it's not inaccurate, not big line items, but the nuance of how it works. But I think the big things, so in any budget, you've got two things you can focus on: costs and revenues, right? And I think we've got to really continue to look creatively at both of those. So on the cost side, and there's just a couple things I've jotted down here. Over the last several years, looking at greater contributions for health insurance, looking at renegotiating lanes and salary advancements to slow the growth of teacher salaries, to an appropriate kind of in accordance with the market. Special ed, join the special ed consortium to get lower cost tuition revenues. Facilities, and we've hired a lot of people in the facilities area that are experts. For example, our director of facilities is a master electrician himself. That saves us like a couple $100,000 over the course of many years because he's doing some of that work. So there's little creative things to do. And then on the revenue side, are there ways that we could actually be a bigger revenue generator as we look at special ed? Are there different centers of excellence we could develop to bring money in? Are there things to think about from that perspective? You asked the bond as well. The bonds, we've got to manage that well. It's got to, the best we can come in on time, on budget, if possible, a little bit under budget. That is a possibility. I know it doesn't sound probable, but it is a possibility that we could. So we've got to keep our close eye on all these things.
Starting with Ms. Nunez, how do you see the structure of administration looking at the building level and district level?
Well, I think part of the work on the policy committee, which we'll be presenting to the whole board, is doing our organizational chart and really thinking about where we want that hierarchy of administrators in the cabinet level. And part of that work was Dr. Wilson, myself, and Lauren Berman sitting and saying, well, who's supervising these teachers and where does this fall under? And if we put this box, so right now it's just a bunch of boxes and names, but what the bigger work is we want to be able to present that and really have clear defined roles, because that's what we need to have in order for our system to function well. And what I can say that we have been working on is really defining, okay, well, this is the special ed director. She is the lead evaluator for her special education teachers, and what does that look like? And where is our assistant superintendent of curriculum instruction on that hierarchy in our chart? So we have been having those conversations with our current interim superintendent, who has then also been going back to the building administrator. So we're really working on making those structures in place so that there's a clear line of the hierarchy in terms of administrators.
I think that from clarity of hierarchy comes a clarification of people's expectations and understanding of the duties that they are obligated to actually be able to deliver on. As I see it, and I've spoken to this before, I think because we haven't had enough people in the central office, it's often been the situation where our superintendent was tasked with doing so much that that person oftentimes got swamped. And so it led to some type of disconnection and overwhelming of that person, so that the people who are actually in charge of leading their respective schools, oftentimes they just didn't have enough support to make changes and have that leadership trickle down to them. So I think that ultimately led to not having the schools really bridge from one to the other. We need to have a stronger central office just in order to empower the schools to understand who the supervisors are, who's the person who's in charge of making the decisions when it comes to curriculum, when it comes to policies that have to be followed, who's the person who is the enforcer of all the different things, ranging from something from like code of conduct. to how the bond is going to be implemented. When you have clearly defined roles, that is something that puts everybody in a better place. You understand who your leadership is, and even if you don't agree with it, you can at least understand the buck stops here.
I think there are two things. There's structure, so those are where the boxes and who goes in those boxes and how do those boxes relate to each other. I think we're pretty clear on what some of that needs to look like. One of them is, for example, an assistant superintendent of curriculum instruction. We've had long conversations about that, and there's some clarity that that box structurally is going to add value. But beyond that, I think the real value unlock is the relationships, the process, the way those people engage with each other. If you have the right people in the right boxes, but they're not working well together, it doesn't really matter. And that's one of the things I think the superintendent being tasked with so much, stretched so thin, that they don't really have an opportunity to be that coach, that developer of people, look at those relationships where they see a breakdown, help that, get better, get stronger. I've seen some. I mean, I don't think it's, everyone here works in some sort of organization, and everyone realizes there's stresses on relationships. And I've seen supers see those stresses and not be able to impact them because they're so busy doing something else. So I think one of the key things that's probably not talked about enough of freeing up the superintendent's time is that they can really assess the organization and what's going on organizationally to see some of those gaps, those holes, coach, work with people, bring them along. That's what makes the organizational structure come to life. It's not about boxes or people in those boxes. But some of it, not all of it.
I was thrilled that we were able to, or we are in the process of hiring an assistant superintendent rather than putting that person as director of curriculum. I think having the two strong people at the top now has been one of the recommendations we've seen for a long time, so that, as you said, we know where the buck stops on these issues, and so that you have an umbrella of, this is our vision. And all these other ideas stem from that. We need that so badly, and I think that getting that in place, and I know their roles are slightly different, but so that's perfect, is going to be the start of what we're hoping is a much more fluid approach to all of these big issues. The other part that I think would be important, because not only does the superintendent get stretched thin, but the assistant superintendent will be stretched thinly. I was the head of the English department when I was teaching, and that was K to 12, and it was hard enough for just one subject to understand. So I'm also in favor of point people in grades for each subject, and that person connects with whoever the leader is in the English department in the middle school, in the elementary school, in the high school, and then they keep those connections going through the grade horizontally, but then they can also meet to align vertically more easily than that one assistant super having to do that whole job too. So I'd add that to the structure.
Let's talk about fast tracking. Taking time with a new superintendent will not support students finishing their Hastings experience who fall short in reading, writing, and math. If presented with evidence this is true, how will you individually advocate for change? And we'll start with Ms. Robles.
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question?
Sure. Fast tracking, taking time with a new superintendent will not support students finishing their Hastings experience who fall short in reading, writing, and math. If presented with evidence that that is in fact true, how will you individually advocate for change?
I mean, I think if we find that we have students who are not meeting the benchmarks that they need in order to be able to graduate from school, we are doing a disservice to them. Obviously, we have to do, I mean, I think one of the purposes of the audit as it was conducted, and which is applicable to all students, is that we identify where it is that we're falling behind or not meeting the needs of our students, wherever it is that they're situated. I mean, from my perspective, it's incredibly important that they have, especially the writing and reading, that's fundamental to everything. You can't let people meet, you can't let somebody graduate from high school not having the skill set that they would need to be able to assert themselves and support themselves once they leave school. I mean, that is, there's nothing more basic than that. I mean, I think that that's something that you would have to obviously review with the building leaders as they currently exist to find out where have things broken down that kids have gotten to the point where they're not writing appropriately, they're not grasping the most basic of skills. You address that, you keep on addressing it until somebody generates the right type of protocol that will be laid out to address the needs of every student. That is our obligation. There's nothing that I can think of that I think that I would feel more passionately about when it comes to having our new leaders here in town.
I think, at the heart of your question is this question about data, looking at data and understanding what's going on across a variety of topics, and one, specifically here, children that are struggling. I would back everything that Sylvia says, and I think as a board, if I take it up a level, we need to get more related to the data of what's going on in the district. I'll be honest and say that the data is not something that we have done a lot of looking at together as a group. I think that doing that, and it provides an opportunity for us to better understand where are these gaps. There's one that you've raised. There's probably others in the district. To understand priorities of what we should really prioritize as far as working together. And ultimately, the board's job is to set goals and to set expectations for the superintendent and to hold that superintendent accountable for those expectations. To the degree to which this sort of thing is happening, children aren't graduating or aren't progressing with those sorts of skills. Of course, we have to look at that and work at that. We've got to start with the data to really understand that better.
I would say echo what you all are expressing, but and add that I'd like to see the superintendent look into this. As you said, the data involved, how many kids are here, what did those cases look like, and what happened. Because that's a failing. It's horrifying. And then go and look at our policy. Do we have checks in place? And if we did, why didn't they work? And let's start to review that and talk to the teachers who had these kids and find out where we broke down, because that's unacceptable.
One of the recommendations that came out of the audit, which Dr. Katzman spoke about after her one-year report, was that each building had finally done their own MTSS, and that system basically is a teacher refers a child when they are having difficulty in whatever subject area, and that's where the data begins on that child. So we can really get down to the granular and see where are we having breakdowns. Is it within a certain grade level band? Is it a certain area of English? Is it a certain area of math? So I think, first of all, that we have some systems in place already to help us understand where these issues are coming from. Because whether it's one child or if it's 20, the system is failing that child or that group of children. And it would be our job to ask the superintendent those questions and say, is that something that we've looked at? And then she can go in and look at the data. What was done at MTSS? How long were they progress monitoring that child for? How often were they reconvening to see if those interventions were working or weren't working? What professional development? Now she can come and tell us, what does our staff need? Is it that we have a gap in learning from our teachers that we need to address so that they can better educate the children that are in front of them? And as a board, it's our job to trust those professionals to tell us this is the issue. And then we can brainstorm as to where we need to get those funds to make whatever they need happen.
We have time for one last question, and then we're going to move on to closing statements. Time has flown for me. I don't know if it has for the candidates, but our final question of the evening. It's been an eventful and sometimes controversial couple of years with a departing superintendent, a board vacancy, and a referendum. For board members, is there something you wish you had done differently? And for non-members, is there something you wish the board had done differently? And we're going to start with Mr. Sondheim.
Is there something I wish I'd done differently over the last couple of years? Yeah, I mean, I think that the you know, as I look at our last superintendent, Tony Sinanis, I think that when he came in, he he was in a thin central office, and he was a new superintendent. And I think that supporting him at the outset, I think we did a good job, but I think there's some places that we could have probably done better. One of the lessons that I took away from that is one of the lessons that I've shared with Valerie, with Dr. Henning Piedmont, which is let's set the agenda at the right level. Let's go at the right speed. Let's not try to eat the whole bear right out of the gates and give you too big of an agenda. And you know, I think back on, were there ways that we could have done a better job of taking some stuff off his plate so that he could better succeed in this new role? And I think there's ways that we could have done that. So.
Dr. Sinanis is who really stands out for me when I think about the last year and the turnover. And actually, Ms. Roy Montesano before that. You know, I think there was a petition involved there, and then with Dr. Sinanis, just a lot of bombardment from all the different stakeholders to the point where he was overwhelmed. And he was new, but we did hire him, and I did feel like the support could have been stronger to give him a leg up. He was immediately shut down in a lot of areas, it seemed. So I would have liked to give him a little more of a chance, because we hired him for a lot of good reasons, and there were many things that we liked about him. If he eventually didn't work out, that's something different. But I can imagine it was a very trying start. That's my main takeaway.
I have to admit, I never was an active participant in politics. It was not something that I knew I had an interest in. I was very happy as a teacher, and being in a community that I love and have grown up in. And I guess if I could do it again, I would have started becoming more vocal and more active sooner. For those of you who have followed the tumultuous journey that I had getting a seat on the board, you know that story very well. And I think I never dreamed that I would even be sitting at this table if it wasn't until parents who had approached me and said, you know our schools, you've worked in our schools, would you consider running? And that was maybe 2 weeks before the election or so. So I think if I could have made that decision earlier, so I could have understood some of the underlying issues a little bit more before coming onto the board, I think that would have helped me get a fuller picture of sort of the dynamics that were happening before I came onto the board, and maybe it would have been a little bit of a smoother transition for the rest of the board members to accept me. So I think if I could have done it all over again, I would have gotten out there a little bit sooner.
I mean, when I think about the last couple of years in terms of turbulence, turnover, volatility, for me, what I would have liked to have seen from the BOE was, I think, communication that gave me a better sense of what was happening, kind of timelines, and not things that made it feel so panicky. It's unsettling, I think, when you welcome new leaders into the district and then suddenly, poof, they're gone. And there are narratives floating around from different junctures, and you don't really know as a parent what to believe in terms of what's happening. What you want is you want to not even know who the Board of Ed is. You want to just know that when your kids go to school, it's in an administration that's running like a smoothly operating machine. And from my perspective, we just need to do a better job of letting people understand, look, we are here. We understand that we have a mission to achieve for you, and that is to give your children the best education possible. We will be honest with you, we will be candid with you, and we will respect confidentiality when we have to. So let's just do a job of all relating to one another and having respect for one another. That's what I would say.
So closing statements are going to be in the order opposite of opening statements, if you remember that order. We'll start with Ms. Nunez.
So first, I want to thank you all once again for being here, and thank you again to the League of Women Voters and the PTSA. And for my closing statement, I'm actually going to start with a short story about how I start every school year. I read a story aloud to my fourth graders because it always amazes me how much they love being read aloud to. And we pick a quote from the story that we read as our class motto, and we decide on promises to each other. And this year, after reading We Are All Wonders, some of the promises that we made to each other included taking risks, trying new things, being flexible, being empathetic, appreciating our own uniqueness and the uniqueness of others, and using our imagination and never stop dreaming. Those are just some of them. But it's these principles, and I really think that anything that you teach in elementary school, it's just for the rest of your life. And it's these things that, and these promises that we made to each other and to ourselves that I bring when I'm on the board. And I hope that that's come through tonight, because in the past 10 months, I've really tried to advocate for things that are really dear to my heart, which included support special education, multiculturalism, mental health, and curriculum alignment. And I will love to be elected again so I can continue to work tirelessly to ask the hard questions and to evaluate if our system is providing the education based on what we value as a community. And I'm really excited to get the opportunity to work with our new superintendent, and I look forward to continuing to work for the best of our children in our community. Please remember to vote on May 21st, and thank you again for your time.
My thanks to the League of Women Voters and the PTSA for sponsoring this forum, and to all of you who took the time from your busy schedules to join us this evening. From where I sit, the best thing I can do is channel the time, knowledge, and energy I possess into the body that steers the course of our district. Naturally, my attention gravitates towards issues like supporting our incoming district leadership as it develops curriculum. The board will also be tasked with overseeing the implementation of the recently passed bond and items that remain outstanding from the special education audit. More broadly, however, my chief aim is to foster a district environment that's based on both mutual trust and respect for professional expertise. For our district's continued growth, it will be pivotal for our multiple stakeholders to strengthen cohesion at both a structural and interpersonal level. I'm committed to being a part of a Board of Education that respects the diversity of opinions but shares a common vision for the district's future. I ask you to vote for me because I'm direct, I show up to do the necessary work, and I commit to work with integrity. Finally, I will say that the main spirit guiding my candidacy comes from my neighbor, a longtime Hastings resident whose children have finished school and moved on. She said, "I just want the district to be great. I know we have so much going for us. If you share this sentiment, please vote for me, and know that we are poised to make excellent strides forward if we work together. I promise to be an asset to our board. Thank you."
So thank you to League of Women Voters and the PTSA. You know, one of my mottos as a consultant is, I'm best doing my job if you don't even know I'm there. And I really do appreciate what you said, Sylvia, about the fact that, you know, the board really shouldn't be that front and center. I mean, our superintendents, our building leaders, the instructional leaders, the teachers should be front and center. My commitment, why I'm here, the reason I was here 3 years ago, the reason I'm here now, is to create the organizational structures, to create really the organizational leadership and the reality to let other people do great things. I don't need any accolades. I don't need to be front and center anyways, anywhere. I end up having to do that because I'm on video every couple weeks. If we could take that out, I would, but, but really, I really want to support Dr. Henning Piedmont and our hopeful new incoming assistant superintendent of curriculum, the building leaders, to all work together to create a reality that is supportive, that is something that teachers, you know, feel supported in. You know, I think one of the most important levers we have is professional development. I mean, we cannot ask our children to be learners and lifelong learners if we're not asking that of our administrators, of our teachers. I see gaps where we've fallen off that a little bit, where some of the teachers and some of the, maybe it's time, maybe it's motivation, you know, I don't know, but we need to, as a board, create the reality and the support structures to make everyone lifelong learners.
Look, I never thought I would end up as co-president of the PTSA or sitting in front of a microphone to run for the Board of Education, but I cannot stop working for the schools. I really am passionate about making improvements, working with parents, working with kids, and our teachers and administrators to make this place outstanding. We have so many good things going for us, so many right ingredients, and I really believe we can get there. I've so enjoyed the work that I've done so far, and I'm going to continue to bring that hard work, that energy, that collaboration to my work on the board. I've got the right experience to ask hard questions, and I'd be thrilled to be there. So please come and vote next Tuesday, all day at the Cochrane Gym.
Now is the time to applaud. I just want to remind everyone that this event was videotaped, and it'll be available to you on your local cable education channels until election. I want to thank the candidates. I want to thank you so much as an audience. And I want to remind you that democracy is not a spectator sport. That's a league slogan, and it's true. So please vote next Tuesday. Thank you. Good night.